Alright, yo what up dudes. Today I'm going to bring you 5 of my picks for the already massive duelist role. Now, personally I prefer making tanks or strategists since that's usually what I play. And also I believe really any Marvel character can become a duelist. It's not hard to make them, it's really just a matter of following the comics. It takes a lot more finesse and a lot more knowledge in order to make a tank or a strategist, at least without ruining the character or doing it poorly. Now before we get into these kits, do me a favor and go on down, hit that like and sub button, and as always leave a comment down below if there's anything you do differently or a character you want to see next time. Now I'm not going to waste any more of your time, let's go ahead and rip it with our first duelist. Now, Carnage is one of those characters that embody the duelist role perfectly. Especially within the lore of Rivals, I can see Carnage viewing this Doom as a savior almost. Viewing each match of Marvel Rivals as a gift from Doom to just lay waste to as many heroes and villains as he wants. Starting out, we have his primary fire, Bloody Cleave. This is a Venom-style primary with 4 tentacles that attack, but instead of spears like Venom, Carnage has axes that slash through, dealing percentile damage, while still being able to melee weave like how you play Venom. Next we have a secondary, Crimson Spear. This is where Carnage launches his arm forward, sending a massive spear towards an enemy. Upon hitting them, it slows them and causes them to take tick damage for a moment, giving Carnage just the opportunity he needs to pounce. For his next ability, we have Bloodstorm. This is where Carnage spins around like a Beyblade for a moment, damaging everyone around him while still being able to move. For his second ability, we have Ripcord. Now, instead of swinging off of surfaces like Venom, Spider-Man, or any of the other Spider people, Carnage swings off of characters, pulling himself directly toward them, or if they're a flying character, he can actually swing like Venom. He embeds his barbs into their body and slowing them all while Carnage gets closer. For his third ability, I give you Murderous Resilience. This is a play off of Venom's symbiotic resilience, but instead of just giving Carnage an insane amount of HP for all he lost, like Venom, I instead tied it in with his passive, Sadistic Frenzy, where Carnage gains a damage buff every time he gets a kill, and he has a meter at the center of his screen that builds up as he deals damage. This affects the percentage of HP he gets back from Murderous Resilience. Meaning instead of the closer to death he is, it's all about how much damage Carnage can deal before he pops this and gets his insane amount of HP. Now for his ultimate ability, we have Rampage of the Abyss, where Carnage shoots out tendrils all around him, grabbing any enemies within range and holding them there, so they can't go any further but they can come closer to Carnage. During this time, all damage Carnage deals is directly converted into shields for him. Now this was heavily inspired by Venom's ult, but I obviously couldn't make Carnage deal 50% health. That would get way too busted. Now for the team up, Symbiotic Family. This is where Carnage gains a damage buff, and Venom whips his tendril around, kind of like Carnage's Bloodstorm, that gives him shields for everyone he hits. This also deals some heavy knockback. As for some cosmetics I'd like to see, obviously there's the movie and comic variants, but I'd also like to see Absolute Carnage. And there's this Uncle Sam skin that I saw that I just absolutely fell in love with. And my final costume pick would be 2099 Carnage. I mean, just look at this thing. Overall, I like it, but since I rarely get to play DPS, I'd love feedback on these designs since I'm pretty out of my element when it comes to making characters that are just designed to kill or hit hard or some other specific thing to DPS. Anyways though, on to our next duelist and my personal favorite X-Man.
To me, my X-Men.
Scott Summers is fairly basic on the surface. Laser eyes are usually accompanied by other abilities since writers hate using them for their actual... Scott Summers is fairly basic on the surface. Now laser eyes are usually accompanied by other abilities since writers hate actually using them to their full extent. But for Scott, his lasers aren't actually heat-based. They're just pure kinetic energy that floods out of his eyes. The primary fire I came up with is called Eye Ray, where Scott fires a single shot of kinetic energy out of his visor that deals damage and pushes away enemies slightly. For his secondary, we have Laser Arc, which is just Scott's primary fire but shot in a much wider arc. allowing him to hit multiple people, but the knockback is slightly less. Now for his first real ability, we have Optic Blast. This is where Scott shoots out a much stronger pulse that explodes, knocking enemies back or allowing Scott to rocket jump. Next up is Kinetic Toss. This lets Scott fire out a pulse of kinetic energy that knocks away enemies and deflects projectiles in whatever direction Scott is facing. Then we have Forceful Pin. This is where Scott fires a huge beam that he controls and bends until it hits an enemy. Immediately afterwards, it grabs them and pins them, allowing him to steer them into a wall for extra damage. This is very similar to how Reinhardt's charge worked in Overwatch. However, during this time, Scott is completely still. Now for his passive, we have Overheat. Now this also doubles as Scott's ammo in a way. Now whenever Scott uses an ability, he gradually builds up heat in his visor, on a graphic you'd see in the center of your screen called his overheat meter. If this gets to 100, Scott would go completely blind like we see from Cloak. This leads us into his team up, Optical Cooldown, where Luna gains a healing buff and Scott gains an ability that allows him to basically freeze his visor, instantly bringing his overcharge meter down to 0. And finally we have his ult, Kinetic Floodgate, where Scott rips off his visor and fires a massive beam that continuously pushes everyone back and deals increased damage if they're pushed into a wall. During this time, Scott is completely immobile. Onto his cosmetics, X-Men have way too many costumes, but I would love to see the Fox Scott, either one, and the Phoenix Force suit, and maybe even the 2099 Cyclops. Now with Scott finished, let's go ahead and move on to single-handedly the most butchered Marvel villain in all of its cinematic history.
Feels like a promise. All gods will die.
It's still insane to me how Taika Waititi somehow managed to make Gore the God Butcher one of the most laughable villains I have ever seen on screen. Had it not been for Christian Bale's near godlike acting, that character would have been ruined forever. But luckily, it's one of the only good things about this movie, strictly because of Christian Bale's amazing acting talent. Gore the God Butcher in the comics is someone who took basically 3 Odin-level beings in order to beat. And then in his own movie debut, he gets beat up by a bunch of toddlers with glowing trinkets. Fuck you, Taika Waititi. Sorry about that. I'm pretty passionate about that movie. Let's get into his primary fire, the Necro Sword. This is Gore's main weapon that deals devastating damage with each swing, causing an inky black slash to launch forward for a few meters. Onto his secondary, we have Sword Hurl. This is where Gore throws his sword and impales an enemy before immediately teleporting to them and slamming them into the ground. Onto his first real ability, we have Shadow Stride. This is where Gore gets to choose an area he can see and instantly teleport there. This teleport would be very similar to what we've seen from Reaper in Overwatch. Onto Gore's next ability, we have Horror Trap. This is where Gore places a horrific monster like we saw in that godforsaken movie. These traps hold whoever steps in them, except for the Thing, completely still for a moment, and notifies Gore instantly. Then we have the All-Black Cloak. To explain a little bit before getting into this ability, Gore wields the all-black Necro Sword. This is a weapon created by Null, the god of symbiotes like Venom, and was used to kill the Celestials and gods. It is also a symbiote, just not in the way that Venom is. It can transform into other items that Gore or any butcher needs. Now with the exposition out of the way, this ability allows Gore to create a cloak out of his Necro Sword that blocks all incoming damage that hits his back, allowing him to turn around and walk out of a fight if he wants to. However, it does have a certain amount of HP before it breaks and Gore starts to take damage again. Now on to Gore's passive, God Killer. This activates when Gore deals damage, allowing him to regain HP depending on how much damage he dealt. It's not 1-to-1, but it is a percentage of it. Digging into his ultimate, we have Divine Executioner. This is where Gore awakens the Necro Sword, making it screech out as it gets much larger and deals significantly more damage. During this time, each kill resets his Sword Hurl cooldown. Now onto his team up, I decided to lean a little bit more into the Necro Sword's actions and a little less into what Gore has done, because Gore doesn't work with anyone. I call it Null's Connection, where Gore gains a damage buff and Venom gains a new ability where when he activates it, he sprouts 2 enormous wings that allow him to carry momentum in order to, well, honestly, go really fast and have a lot of fun, and also increase the damage and the AoE size of his slam. Now, Gore doesn't have all that many cosmetic options outside of comics and the MCU design, but please, for the love of all that's holy, let me forget what happened in Thor 4. Anyways though, some cosmetic options I came up with was obviously the MCU and the comic book designs, but also a Null skin, since I'd imagine Null would always be more like a Dracula character, just a villain for a season and never really a character.
Hey! Wait! You may be wondering why the red suit. Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed. This guy's got the right idea. He wore the brown pants. Fine! I only have 12 bullets, so you're gonna have to share.
Let's count them down.
When it came to making Deadpool, there were so many options and so many different ideas that I had, I couldn't just make one. I only put one in this video, but do not be surprised if later on you see a video that is strictly Deadpool for 15 minutes where I just break down every single ability I wanted to give him, because there's just so much potential with Deadpool and he can really go into any role. It did feel kind of impossible to make one kit that summarizes everything that Wade does, but I did my best. You will be seeing him again though. But with that said, let's start with his primary fire, dual gold-plated 50 caliber Desert Eagle pistoleros. Now where Wade got these, I have absolutely no idea, but these are two hard-hitting pistols that Deadpool fires simultaneously. For his secondary, we have dual katanas. Now these are weapons that Deadpool can actually swap to in order to have a melee option that isn't just a pistol weapon. Additionally, these also change a future ability we're going to get to in just a moment. For his first real ability, we have Regeneration Field, where Deadpool plops down a machine filled to the brim with his blood, spraying it around like a sprinkler and healing anyone in the area for the duration. Next up is his weapon-dependent abilities. So if he's using his pistols, he has access to My Little Friend, where Deadpool pulls out a grenade launcher and fires around, dealing massive AoE damage that also leaves the ground on fire. This deals double damage to structures, shields, or walls. But if he's using his katanas, he has access to Katana Deflect. This is where Deadpool locks in and slices all incoming projectiles right before they hit him. Now onto his third ability, we have Chimichanga of Doom. Okay, I admit, I might have been a little hungry when I came up with this, but let me explain. Wade throws out a bag of Mexican food with Doom's face on it, wearing a sombrero and a mustache. And when an enemy walks into it, it activates, erupting in electricity that stuns everyone in an AoE for just a second. Now, Deadpool technically has two passives, but one of them is just him counting his bullets and reloading really cool because I thought that was funny. But his real passive is called Dying Factor. When Deadpool reaches 1 HP, he remains there for a few seconds, regardless of any healing or damage. I wanted this to mirror Wolverine's healing factor without being the exact same thing. Most likely they're just going to give him the healing factor ability Wolverine has, but I wanted to try to throw out something a little bit different. Onto his final ability, I felt like a fourth wall break was in order. Enter his ultimate, Eat Shit Cass, where Deadpool spins and puts on a cowboy outfit before locking onto all enemies in his view, dealing more damage the longer he charges it. The damage is split among them, so executing one person is really fast, but a whole team is going to take a lot more focus. However, this ultimate cannot miss and charges fairly quickly. Now onto his team up, I had to go with Born Canada Strong, where Wolvie gains a damage buff and Deadpool gains a new ability that lets him strap on a Hugh Jackman mask and take less damage for a few seconds. Finally, for Deadpool, really his cosmetics can be anything. And for the first time in this series, I can't just ask for the MCU and comic design, because Deadpool is almost perfectly adapted. They're almost identical. But I still can ask for X-Force, Nice Pool, and Zenpool. Maybe even the 2099 suit. That one's just awesome. Not really Wade Wilson, but it's still cool. Alright, that's Deadpool done. I think I did a fairly good job, but I probably will do an entire video just dedicated to how much you can do with Deadpool. Because if I'm being completely honest, you could probably have a Deadpool for each role and have them be completely different characters. So you might see that in the coming future. Anyways, let's get on to someone who looks very similar to Deadpool, but is missing one key feature. With the release of Daredevil Born Again, I made this kit, and while I really enjoyed the show, it made me that much more impatient for him to enter Marvel Rivals' roster. So for his primary fire, we have Baton Thwack, which is just a basic baton melee combo, but it has the same effect Captain America has, where once he hits someone 3 times with it, it switches to a ranged style where he can throw the batons and get a few hits in. As for his secondary, we have Baton Toss. This is where Deadpool throws his baton and reveals all enemies around it, whether they're invisible or behind a wall. Additionally, this also deals damage and ricochets between a couple people. Onto his next ability, we have Devil's Hook. This is where Matt sends out a hook from his wrist that, if it hits a surface, simply pulls him up to it. But if it hits an enemy, sends Matt towards them with a flying knee, knocking them to the ground and allowing Matt to get a couple free hits in. For his second ability, I give you Foggy Memories, where Daredevil screams out, remembering the death of his best friend, gaining an attack speed increase and a damage reduction for the duration. For his third ability, we have Acrobatics. This just simply allows him to double jump in the air and run along walls, kind of like Iron Fist. Now onto my favorite part of his kit, his passive, Blind Sense. Daredevil is completely blind, which I wouldn't have affect how the player actually sees the enemies naturally, but when an enemy is far away from him and not moving, they would disappear. And he can reveal enemies that are invisible or behind walls when he uses a secondary fire. Now this also means that Matt isn't affected by vision obscuring effects like Punisher's smoke or Cloak's blinding wall. Additionally, Matt also crits whenever an enemy is blinded. For Matt's ultimate, we have Red Devil's Will, where Matt throws down a shit ton of smoke bombs and obscures all of the vision of the enemies, while his allies can still see through it. During this time, anyone in the smoke is blinded, and Daredevil can see them clearly, like how Punisher sees someone behind a wall, just the silhouette. This also grants him free critical hits on anyone who dares to step into his smoke. Now to finish off the video, we have his team up, Devil's Sous Chef, where Daredevil and Punisher join forces, Daredevil gaining a damage buff, and Punisher learning the positions of anyone Daredevil discovers. As for cosmetics, I'd love to see a lawyer suit for Daredevil. And then there's obviously the MCU and comic designs, they'd be awesome. For me personally, I would love the Hand of God suit that he wears when he goes into hell to get Foggy out. Alright y'all, that was the 5 duelists I developed for Marvel Rivals. Overall, I'm pretty proud of them. I think certain things could be tweaked or done differently. I will be doing an entire video on only Deadpool. And in the future, I'm going to do a video completely dedicated to doing the people you have all asked for. So stay tuned for that and leave a comment if you might want to be in it. But with all that said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.